in October of last year, Lyndon LaRouche initiated what was called the Manhattan Project. And this was a project to begin to retake the United States by re-invoking, in an efficient way, the memory of and the work of Alexander Hamilton and the Hamilton-Washington presidency, the first American presidency. To that end, we've been holding town meetings, we've been holding other meetings for many months now, and the process has now begun to mature, and we're about to take it to a completely different place, different level. For the last 6 weeks, Lyndon LaRouche has been addressing the nation via a Thursday telephone call, conference call. And over 500 plus people each week get on, and there have been a few thousand people that have now gone through this process. What we're beginning to see is that the citizens are beginning to get the idea that they are free to think and free to find out how to think in a time of crisis. There's no American who's more prepared and has had a better record of actually demonstrating his ability to forecast and to know what the truth is, because he sticks to the truth. No matter what the adversity is, that's his mission. And he thinks that that should be your mission. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce somebody whom you all know, Lyndon LaRouche. Lynn, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh.
Perhaps?
Yes, you're quite audible.
Okay, very good. We, as I indicated before, just by the remarks leading in here, I've been conducting a series of Thursday events which occur in this time in the late evening, and those go on into beyond that, because we're going into a national broadcast, effectively discussion. Now, this thing has worked, and I think that as a result of what has worked so far, that we have now decided, among bouncing ideas around us, that I should appear on this date, and perhaps for other later dates in the same way. Now, the intention is, and my intention is, we have a scattered organization in the nation, our organization. So different parts of the local organization have their own particular style. Now, there's nothing wrong with having an own style, but the question is, how do we get a coherent national viewpoint expressed through that medium? So what we have done, and we've done for the recent weeks, each Thursday, we've done just exactly that, and we've taken account of what the effect of this has been, what the discussions are, what the issues are, what the nature of the questions are, what we can do as an organization in order to bring about a coherent, not a random this or that, but a coherent view of what the state of the United States is right now, from our standpoint as a patriotic organization, and in respect to important people abroad who are interested in this same issue. And so therefore that's been the intention. And what we've done generally so far in the experiment, which we run on the Thursday evening event, late at 9 o'clock or something, late in the evening for that, in order to synchronize our audience, which of course is obviously goes primarily directly along the 6 regions of the United States. So by putting it that way, we have been able to have some very profitable results, because the results are largely not only what I say, but what the questions are, which are the people on the other end of the phone are doing, and also in terms of discussion of those matters, and trying to clarify, understanding what the principles must be, which must be considered in order to address the obvious implicit message of our organization as such. We are a unique organization. There is nothing like us at our best in any part of the United States, in any part of the world in general. We are, as an organization, a unique institution. We have, however, suffered from the effect in recent years in which we have different organizations or different parts of the organization, but they're really different organizations. And they're fairly relatively small in number, not by any means, in no case, something comparable to the what happens in Manhattan in the events here. And therefore, the point is to introduce a coherent approach to the problems which this scattered form of organization has produced. When we're trying to do, while we have people in different areas, as in this locale as such, or in other parts of the United States where we're active, that we are going to have an effective common approach in terms of the discussion process in different parts of the nation and among different individuals. And the people who are interested in these things, who are coherent, whose ideas are coherent with the kind of questioning which we think would be profitable. And this has been in an elementary way, very profitable so far, very successful. It's not some bamboozle, it's not something, well, not great or this. It's simply us dealing with leading projects, not just accidents, but leading projects on which the development of the function of the United States as a leading body must cohere with each other. It doesn't mean they have to agree with each other on everything, but the discussion should be coherent in the sense dealing with the issues which, broadly defined issues, which are most urgent inside the United States, but also internationally. And what I'm able to do, essentially, because of my relationships with international affairs in distant related organizations to our own, that we are trying to build and are building a broad organization in the United States which is coherent with the people of the United States who are in this process. And to unite that inside the United States with coherent issue matters which are international. We are concerned with China, we are concerned with Russia, we're concerned with Germany, we're concerned with Italy, we're concerned with France, and so forth and so on, including Greece, of course. So therefore, we're trying to create an international coherent force among different nations which have different specific cultures to bring the forces of that type into collaboration in the form of a dialogue relationship and common concerns. And therefore, the time has come to come to my point, which I'm making right now, is that the natural place in the tradition of Alexander Hamilton is to situate the formation or the reformation and redevelopment of the United States by locating the questions to be asked and answered from the standpoint of Manhattan, from Alexander Hamilton. So Hamilton was the true founder of our society in leading it, bringing it to a unity. There would have been no unity in the United States without Alexander Hamilton. He was the genius who took a sloppy organization in Philadelphia and turned it into an organization, the mightiest organization intellectually on the planet. He, however, was, of course, had opponents. And some of these Polands came from what we call today the southern states. And we have never been rid of the obscenity of what the southern states have tended to represent. Not because of the people themselves, but because of the kind of leadership in the area, which is the area, of course, of the Confederacy. And there's no significant difference between the Confederacy and what it goes off in many parts of the United States today. Now, my view is this, that what we must do is take the area of Manhattan, which for reasons of Alexander Hamilton and related matters, is the natural center of the intelligence of the people of the United States. And to bring that thing into a united force, or a unifying force, which will enable us, in the United States in particular, to develop a coherent kind of consideration by the United States itself, but also to create like that method, to create what much needed inspiration for our people, but also for other people in other parts of the world. Most parts of the world are divided deeply in culture and other respects. I believe that the United States is the most unifying organization on the planet in terms of the history of things as such, and in terms of the emergence of new developments, as in China. Well, China is a very ancient nation, as you all know. It's one of the original societies which are of cultivation in the whole planet. It had setbacks at certain points. It's coming back full. China today is the most important nation in terms of capability of all the nations of the planet today. They have the greatest rate of genius. Now, this genius is deep within China's culture. But what's happened is that the Chinese culture, the culture of China, has restored itself to the kind of thing that it was at the earlier periods of greatest achievement of China. Then. Now, that's only a model. We have other parts of the world. Our job is, while we are a certain nation, the United States, with close alliances, we also realize the time has come that the old idea of nations as being set against each other is nonsense. Disagreements have to be resolved. False things have to be corrected. But the objective is to bring mankind as a body together. In their different languages, their different cultural histories, all the examples of that. We must unify the planet, get rid of the diseases which have killed mankind repeatedly. The Renaissance is a good example of what the achievement was. The time has come that we must do our part to this effect. But first of all, foremost, we must bring coherence to the United States itself. There is, in cultural divisions, there is no efficient coherence within the United States as a whole. This area, the area which is situated around Manhattan, contains all kinds of people in it. But there's a very significant part of the population of the Manhattan area immediately in its immediate vicinities, which has a very special common belief, dedication. Maybe it's only 25%. Maybe it's as much as 35%. I don't know the measure. We haven't tested it. But we do know that when you get into about the 20 to 25% rate of the population of the area of Manhattan and its immediate surroundings, you are dealing with a force which is the most efficient means and instrument for bringing the people and culture of the United States to some common degree of understanding. Again, considering the evil that's going on in the Congress, the foulness which is destroying us, swindling kinds of policy making, Bad presidents, I mean, not just bad presidents, I mean evil presidents. The Bushes, for example. The Bushes are not things you want to be caught in. You have other kinds of people. Obama is not fit for human consumption. What he's doing now is evil, absolute satanic evil. The man is stupid, he's pumped up, he's arrogant, and he's vicious. And he's trying to get us into a thermonuclear war globally. So therefore, we must have a certain development of togetherness, not as something, just a willful thing, oh, we're going to join the same club. We're not talking about a club. We're talking about human beings. We're talking about society and cultural things that are important. We try to bring these things together, but the main thing is mankind, contrary to some people's ideas, is not something which anyone can just pass off. Mankind is a creative force. There is no other animal, or no animal, who can equate what mankind represents. The human mind is a unique thing. It has no commonality directly. Yes, you want to pat your dog, you want to milk your cow, but this is not what the matter is. The point is the development, the progress of human beings' ability to change the course of mankind. I'll give you just one example, because I want to get into the discussion as such. One of the issues that's on the plate right now is the question of water. Now, this issue is particularly strong in California and in southern states west of the Mississippi. There's a dreadful water problem. Some people say we have to kill people to get rid of to save the water. That's going on in California right now. The governor of California has that policy. He's declared it publicly. It's not something we picked up from gossip or bad information. It's his words alone. Now, his father was a good governor. He's a no good governor. He's hostile to humanity per se. Unlike his father, who was a generous man and an efficient one, an efficient representative. But some things that got in there from Britain between the father's role, which was a good one, and Schwarzenegger, that is the devil himself, not in disguise, but in almost naked exposure. So therefore, these are the kinds of things we have to consider. We have to organize our intention with respect to humanity. We have to understand the issues of the future of mankind. As we know, nobody comes back from death. No one. I don't think it's happened. I mean, I am close to death a couple of times in healthcare and so forth. But no one, as I've known, has ever come back from death. The meaning of life, therefore, is the role of what the individual can contribute to the future of mankind. This comes in all kinds of ways. It comes in concern by some people for other people. All the kinds of things that make life better for humanity in general. And that's what we're supposed to be. And I would say that one thing here is extremely important. Where's the unity, the efficient unity of our system of government in the United States when we have what's happening in the southern states now, what's happening in other locations, what's happening to our children, the degeneration of this society, the stupidity of the educational system, the destructive force which has now become what, for example, Manhattan had one of the best systems of education anywhere. What happened to it? What happened to the destruction of the teaching process which existed in Manhattan among children who often came from poor families and other families? And therefore, what's happened, we have to come to ourselves and to organize ourselves as actually part of the nation. Not New York as such, but the role of the New York area portends for the people of the nation. Hamilton's tradition. Therefore, my contention was, well, look, I was living in Manhattan for a considerable time. I went through all kinds of experiences there, good and bad. I was generally successful in what I wanted to do on the good. On the bad, I was not always able to beat off the beasters. But so therefore, my view was, for me, for my background, for my history, for my past, for my destiny, I said, even though I'm not living in Manhattan, I said, this is the area in which the place is to rebuild the United States. And therefore, let's take the forces of this region, not just limited to this region, but forces in this region, and mobilize them by their own conscience to define what they can make as a contribution to restoring the quality of intention of Alexander Hamilton. And Manhattan is the headquarters in the spirit of Alexander Hamilton. It's in that part of Manhattan that Hamilton is remembered. And it was Hamilton who created the effective role of the United States. And I think, therefore, we should now, we can do it. We can organize it. Let's reorganize the United States to what it was intended to be, as Hamilton intended. And let us determine what action we have to take in concert to bring back very quickly more and more influence of the legacy of Hamilton, which is not that what it is at his time in practice, but the quality of intention which his life represented and his assassination represented is a factor which, if unified within the region of Manhattan, can be the strongest force that we in the United States can provide to save and to improve our United States.
Okay, so people should proceed. People should proceed to the microphone. Microphone. Here. Bruce, you first? Okay, fine. We get Bruce up. We get Jessica up. Okay, fine. And you have to get up. Okay, great. Go ahead, Bruce.
Good afternoon, Mr. LaRouche.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I think I can, yes.
Good afternoon. I would like to know, get an update on the 28 pages and what it means to American people. And the second question is, can you tie in, as a reminder, the Declaration of Independence to Glass-Steagall and the importance of it all?
Well, let's take the second question first, because it's the easiest one to Glass must be the fundamental call of the United States. Franklin Roosevelt made that clear. And after Franklin Roosevelt died, things went down. There were some things, Kennedy's were very positive back then. Other people didn't been good for, but that's the issue. Now, the other problem we have now on these issues, the issue is correct in the fact that it is an issue, and it is a correct statement of the issue, which is done by a group of leading people, including members of Congress, with what that issue is. However, I have another view, which is also equivalent to that, but maybe more necessary. That we have all these points, these pages. Well, what are the pages? The pages are a report taken from the federal government for proceedings, which then would turn into classification of being classified, suppressed. So this thing is not an efficient instrument. Its moral is the fact that suppression of the rights of people to find out what the devil was killing people in New York and beyond. That's issue. But the other thing, I have known very well why my studies and things in national affairs. I know very well all about it. We're talking about the effect the pages mean. We're talking about the debate over whether we can expose or must suppress the facts of what called violence. I don't argue in the ethics. Of course, it's very hard because of what happened in the Civil War thing. But the fact is,
Lynn, can you hear me? You're
so-
breaking up on this end. They have to mute us on your end. I believe that's the problem. You're breaking in and out, so your words are getting chopped in half. Most of what you've just said, unfortunately, was unintelligible.
Oh,
If somebody...
okay. I got you. Go. Okay, let's try it again. Can we get the right communication about the breakup? Okay, thumbs up.
You won't be able to hear them, but they can hear you.
Oh, I see. Okay, you can hear me, but I can't hear you.
Yeah.
We'll have to switch this back and forth. Okay. Now, the point is that the pages are very important. What's important about it is the suppression of the pages. But the suppression, the elimination of the suppression of the papers will not tell you what the story was. Now you will be able to hear or see or whatever. You'll be able to see what happened, in a sense, but you don't see it. I know it already. I don't need the pages for my purpose. I was on the scene. First of all, I was on the scene when it happened. I wasn't there, but I was watching it by television. Of these two planes circulating around Manhattan, and the collapse. I watched the collapse of the Twin Towers of Manhattan from my video access. I was able to analyze exactly what was happening from all that information. I also had advanced information on what the causes of that effect were. The point was the British Empire, uses the system to use the Saudis, including the Saudi representative to the United States, were involved in the organization of the entire murder system which happened in Manhattan and also in one part of Washington, D.C. It's spilled over with the military, that thing that way. All right, now I knew all this stuff. I knew the thing going back before that. I didn't know it was going to happen, but I knew what was happening. The British Empire, and only the British Empire, which uses the Saudis as a puppet, was used by the British to use the Saudis as the instruments equipped by Britain. The training the fueling and everything else was done by the British Kingdom, by the British Empire. They did it. For example, the Saudi ambassador to Washington, who was a long-standing one and had been a pilot, a wartime pilot, was the organizer of the Saudi deployment inside the United States, which pulled off 9/11. During that period, just at that process, a great number of the Saudis inside the United States, including Florida and other locations, left the United States under protection by the President of the United States. And it's the Saudis and the British who have caused the attack on the United States. And it is two presidencies, one, Bush, Cheney, and the other one, Obama. Bush, Cheney, and Obama are the guilty Americans for the death of Americans in Manhattan area. And this group, also the military group around the Pentagon there. So what do we need to know? I already know it. I already know what happened. I was doing intelligence tracking of what the British were up to about oil circulation and about what the Saudis were doing. I knew how this was organized. I didn't know what was going to happen. But from the time that the thing was started, when a plane in England, Boston airport, when the plane was captured by Saudis, as Saudi pilots who had been trained by the Saudi ambassador to the United States, was the organization of this thing. There was a whole story, but it was always British. British money, oil money. That's how it was organized. Why do you think, therefore, that there's a need for 9/11 report pages? The information was already there. I had the information. I didn't have the closed evidence, but I knew exactly what it was. And I was working with several people who were working on as specialists, because I had certain qualities of intelligence qualification. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I understood what the implications were of what was about to happen. And what's happened is two presidencies of the United States, Bush, Cheney, and Obama, are responsible for the deaths in Manhattan in particular. And it is the members of the presidency, including the members of Congress, who have failed to reveal the facts. In other words, the people of the United States were murdered, especially in this New York area and then around the Pentagon area. They were murdered by Saudis. But the Saudis were deployed by the Saudi ambassador to the United States. And they were deployed by forces which were trained and directed by the Saudis, with complicity of things like the FBI. That's how it happened. The FBI did finally leak a few pieces of information because they were hard pressed to do so. But the FBI never acted to act in defense or exposure of the attack on the United States by the Saudis. That's the story. That's the truth of the matter. We've always known that. I've known it since before it happened, because I knew the process that led into its happening. I didn't know it was going to happen that way. I thought it might be something else. But I was also working with other people who were expert in this area, as I was. And therefore, that's how we know this thing. And to this day, the typical American is not allowed to have access. Even members of Congress are forbidden to expose the facts. And there are some of these people who were pressured not to expose them, were frozen. They were not allowed, on the penalty of law, to expose publicly what they knew. And this is what? This is the Bush-Cheney administration and Obama administration. They are themselves the essential violators against the United States in the 9/11 case. And that thing is still treated as a secret. And what I know from my expert experience, I know this. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. But I knew the Saudis are bad. I knew the British were bad. And that both proved out. And idiots who believe that the British are honest people, when it comes to the Queen and the King and Queen, no. They're evil. They did it. The British Empire is the chief authority. The Saudis were the subordinates. And they were sent to do that against the United States. The British Empire, the King and Queen, did it. And that's a fact. And on this thing, I'm expert. There are some other people who I also know who are also expert. But I'm expert on that one. I didn't catch how it was going to happen. But the minute it began to happen, I knew exactly what had happened. And a lot of other people did too. That's one of the things. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. LaRouche. Can you hear it? Can you hear me now?
I hear you.
Yes? Okay. It's not on. It's on?
Mm-hmm. I hear it.
Oh, okay, good. This is Jessica White from Brooklyn, and I have somewhat of a statement and something I'd kind of like you to maybe say a little bit about, because it's not exactly a question, but on the Monday night call with Lynn Speed and Diane, the crisis of the takeover of the papacy by the satanic personage of Schellenhuber on behalf of the royal British family was discussed. And then that led me into some deep thought about the nature of genocide. And this type of genocide that's found in British operations. And these operations, in my mind, are kind of like a Medusa with the snakes all over her head. And these things reach out into many different places in many different ways. And then I started thinking about how this whole British thing can kill 6 million people. 6 billion people, excuse me. Now, there's your in-the-face method of genocide, where you have wars and famine and fascists in the Ukraine and provocations against Russia and China that could lead to thermonuclear war. You have famine. You have the drought in California. This is kind of in-your-face stuff that they kind of ignore. And then there's the pestilence problem like Ebola that they also sort of ignored. And then you have the dirty deal stuff like the takedown of Glass-Steagall, the takedown of the Hill-Burton Act. You have all of the operations run against the people of the United States that actually kill people. And I wanted to kind of bring a little story of my own into it, because I think everybody in this room probably can look at something that's happening in their life that shows that this genocide is underway. I have a grandson that's 3.5 months old. He just had surgery. He was in the ICU for approximately 3 or 4 days. And this is supposed to be a fantastic hospital, great nurses, all of that kind of thing. And actually it is. They decided that it was time to put him into the regular unit because he'd been in the ICU long enough for him to do pretty good. So they put him in the regular unit. My daughter and I thought it was too soon, and we were right. But the reason we thought it was too soon is because in the regular unit, there's 7 babies to every 1 nurse. In the ICU, there's 1 nurse to every 2 babies. And so once he goes into the regular unit, you have a situation where there's not enough trained nurses, there's not enough trained doctors, accidents happen. He had a tube in his stomach. It was accidentally pulled out because he was crying. Yeah. And some Good Samaritan person from the child center came in, picked him up, didn't know what she was doing, put him down. His tube got caught in the covers and pulled out. So they thought about redoing some of the surgery, but they were trying to see if they could put the tube back in without doing the surgery over again. Well, my daughter ran around like a whirling dervish, you know. She was just cussing everybody out and very upset and everything. The surgeon came. Fortunately, he was able to put this back in without surgery with the help of the radiologist and this tiny little microscope that they could use to put into his tummy. All right, so to make a long story short, we need Glass-Steagall. The reason we need Glass-Steagall, the reason we know that these things are genocide is because if there are 7 nurses to 1 1 nurse to 7 babies, then people are going to die. If there is no hospital to go to, because all the hospitals have been taken down, people are going to die. If you introduce these kinds of things where they take down the unions and education is not existent, there's no training, people are going to die. Now we introduce this thing of the papacy, where we have an actual satanic takeover, and more people will die. But people don't understand the subtlety of it, what's really going on with it, how people are dying every day, and it's not a big war that's on the 6 o'clock news. So I'd like you to kind of comment on what I've been thinking about as my role in reaching out and educating people as to the subtlety of this genocidal program and how we can make the citizens of the United States understand that their families are being touched right now by these kinds of things, and they're so subtle and there's so many operations that we need everybody to be on board. It's not just what we're fighting against, it's what we're fighting for.
We have a double problem here. What you're saying is, I don't have any problem at all with this, what you're saying. Not at all. It's something that I can know in part, in many cases, and what I know is going on. What the key thing to understand in this case is, if you get outside of New York City, you really get into hell. Because you have, despite what the degeneration of New York, Manhattan, and so forth, in terms of many features of the place that used to have some decent capabilities, is that parts of the United States don't have much of any ability at all to protect themselves against totally unnecessary deaths of young people and older people as well. So the problem is we have under Bush and Cheney successively, in increasing, that Cheney and Bush were almost as bad as Obama. Obama is much more evil than these were. And because if you look what he's doing right now, he just left the Democratic Party and became a rabid Republican. And he's running an operation right now to screw up everything that's worthwhile doing from the United States. This is a swindle beyond belief. And Obama is actually a clearly satanic figure. If you know him as I know him and know his behavior, he's a satanic figure. And the fraudulent way in which he was even made president was complete fraud. It was done for Britain. It was done for that group. They did it. He was brought in by the king and queen, the king of Britain. He was their puppet. They did these things. If you know what he did, for example, I took him on shortly after he was inaugurated, and I denounced him publicly, and I gave him some of the documents publicly on what he was doing, what the crimes were. Well, guess what happened? Guess what happened to me in the next following period? Well, I bounced back. It was about 1 week or so, or a little more. I bounced back. There was some kind of drugging operation done, because all things suddenly changed, and then I changed back and found out I recovered from this thing. But he's an evil man. He's a British agent. Obama is a British tool. He's an evil tool. You just look at. Remember, there's a recent appearance of him appearing in the White House, and he had the vice president sitting beside him. The vice president is a piece of work in himself, but he was sitting there, and the kind of jazz, and I mean jazz, what we mean by jazz generally. The guy is a lame brain, but he's an assassin. You know, he's like a gangster, Wall Street gangster, or California gangster, or what used to be the Detroit gangsters. These guys kill, and Obama's one of those people. He kills. He's killing now. He's now destroying the medication which is needed by people in various parts of the world, including the United States, and shutting them off from the medication that they need. You know, categorical elimination of that. This is being done in the international field as well as in the United States. So the problem is, if we want to win, we have to get that guy out. Now, why? What is Obama? What does he really signify? Obama is, number one, a British agent. He's a tool of the British Queen. Now, if you remember back when he was becoming elected as stuck in there as president, what was he doing? He was acting as an agent of the Queen, of the British Queen. This is the same British Queen under whose regime we have the 9/11 issue, Manhattan. He's tied to the same business, the British business, just like 9/11. Yeah, 9/11 what? The Saudis took the rap for it. They were protected. But the British had organized it. Everything that the Saudis were able to do was done through petroleum operations run by the British system. That's how the Saudis were pumped up. The air to pump up to do what they did. And these are a pretty bunch of evil, satanic people. If you know the area as I do, and have dealt with that area. This is a satanic force. The Queen is a satanic force. Schellenberg is a satanic force. He's been a satanic force for a long time. We've known him that. These are our problems. If we were able to get ourselves to gain access to the truth on these matters, right? And if people were not too scared to expose those facts, as even members of Congress are terrified, afraid of exposing these facts. The question is, we have to get a mobilization inside the United States which will move the process through. Right now, we've got to get Obama out of government. We've got to get him out quickly. We may be as close as 2 weeks from World War IV or V and VI and VII altogether. Because if a war breaks out with Obama as the president, I guarantee you there will be almost no one left alive before that war is finished. Because you got a situation. The most effective nuclear power in the world today is Russia. Now, the reason for that particular peculiarity is that Russia was a leader during World War II in developing methods of such weaponry. This was done and developed as a reaction against the Nazis in World War II. The Russians kept in their system kept that not that knowledge, it was simply their skills. They had developed skills which other nations had not yet bothered to develop. And as they got angry about things, they began more and more to look on nuclear potentials. Then the time came when I was visiting, shall we say, with Russians. At that point, there was a decline in the military activity, the potential of Russia. The Soviet Union disappeared. Russia emerged as a substitute for all of that. This is the way things work. Also today, Russia has a superior thermonuclear capability over the United States, even the United States. But Putin is not going to throw it. Putin has no intention of launching an attack of that type against the United States. Now, however, if Obama remains as president, Obama is determined to launch nuclear war. And the nuclear effect could occur within 2 weeks. About 2 weeks is a fair estimate. We have to stop Obama now by pulling him out of power. Because the danger now, it goes with the Schellenhuber operation. The British monarchy has always been divided, particularly on this current monarchy, the current house of Windsor. They have always been for the reduction of the human population, for the massive reduction of the human population. And therefore they have an intent in that direction. If Obama decides to go to war, and he's pretty much said he is going for war against China and so forth and other things, if that happens, if Obama launches a thermonuclear attack on China, etc., 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 then at that point, that Obama makes that decision, at the same point, or second difference, Russia will react with its superior thermonuclear links, which it would otherwise not do at all. So therefore, the fact that we allow Obama to stay in power in the United States is the most evil thing on the planet today. We've got to prevent it. We've got to get this guy thrown out. And that's the kind of thing which we need to have in the United States. We need in the United States itself a role of government which, when confronted with some crime like that Obama represents right now, if the nation's government is too cowardly to intervene and throw him out of office, that's what the danger is. And you have two characters of members of Congress and institutions. They're either opportunists, careerists, or they're stupid. Or just plain cowards. And that's the kind of problem which threatens us most immediately. My concern is, I'm looking constantly at this floating term. I know we are within approximately 2 weeks, or maybe plus or minus, or more, maybe 4 weeks, as much, that Obama, if he remains president during this time, will continue his intent to launch World War III. If that is to occur, it will be a thermonuclear war. And a thermonuclear war, launched by Obama and defended against by Putin afterward, when Obama makes the move, will probably exterminate most of the human population of the planet within a few minutes. So therefore, we need people with guts.
Good afternoon, Mr. LaRouche. My name is Eugene. Can you hear me?
You bend over, this will drain on it.
Good afternoon, Mr. LaRouche.
Yeah,
Can you hear me, sir?
I do.
Oh, good. Hi, my name is Eugene Bronstein, and I live in the Bronx, New York. I'm from the Bronx, New York. I have two questions for you, only two questions. My first question is there anything good? Can you think of anything good that the current President Obama has done? Is there anything that we can give him credit for, or is everything about him negative and evil? And my second question is, what do you think about the current Supreme Court decision that gay couples now can legally get married in all the states of our country? Those are my two questions.
Okay. Well, first, on Obama, he's hopeless. I mean, I say hopeless. I don't mean it's just weak. I mean, the point is this guy has to be thrown out of office. All the evidence needed to throw him out of office exists. But there are people in the government who are cowardly and will not risk their own careers over that issue. Huh? Oh, the survival of civilization. I mean, that's pretty stupid people. But there are a lot of members of Congress which are pretty stupid when they come to these kinds of matters. On the homosexual thing, look, this is a difficult thing to deal with honorably. On the one hand, if you have some people who are engaged in homosexual activities, they're not doing anything to evil to other people. You be very careful and very discreet and try to avoid a conflict. However, if the thing is spread, the spread thing, such that it destroys the integrity of society, then it's different. Now, what's done by the Supreme Court, by the majority of the Supreme Court, is an extremely disgusting decision. You want to avoid, since we have members of society which are homosexual, we do not want to get involved in running their lifetime. If they can keep their own lifetime private, we may not be happy about it. But I've had a number of people I knew, who were homosexual. But I would never bring the issue up. I would know what the truth was, and I would never bring it up. But the problem is what happened is what the Supreme Court did by the majority has created an absolute disaster, and it was a deliberate one. This is not for the homosexuals. This is to cause chaos. Because the typical case is you don't bring the issue up. If people want to have homosexual relationships and they insist on it and they don't do anything, we're not going to get in there. We're not going to try to do something arbitrary. We're going to try to get them to discourage from doing things that may affect other people. And I've seen this thing, at my age, you get a lot of knowledge of this matter, and I just say, duck it. Don't involve yourself in it. When it becomes a panic, then it becomes a problem.
My name is Sergeant Bill Monroe. It's an honor and a pleasure to address you this afternoon. I'm a little bit older than you. I'm only 95 years young.
By a small.
Yes, go ahead. Okay. Fortunately, I am in my right mind, and I want to kind of take a slight deviation. I want to bring you back to a few memories. When I was drafted into the United States Army, somehow or another they found out I had a certain degree of intelligence, so they promoted me into administration. Thank God that happened, because the records of many servicemen came through my hands were grossly distorted. I spent many times, many hours, sometime up to 3 o'clock in the morning, straightening out these veterans' affairs. I landed on D-Day Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that I don't talk too soft.
You're fine.
Okay. Okay. I landed on D-Day, the third wave of invasion, and I survived that. When things got rather quieted down after some time, I had a very unique experience. I had a one-on-one with General Charles de Gaulle through the association of knowing the mayor of Saint-Mère-Église. My mother taught me well. I spread camaraderie throughout the world. Everywhere I went, I tried to express these type of values, which I consider the same as you are doing here now. Going away from that, my interest now is primarily with the Brits and that president that we have in office today who does not seem to go along with that. I would like to hear what you have to say about that crazy President Obama. Okay? I want to sit down because I can't stand too long.
I understand. Very quickly. First of all, I'd like to say that I heard about your case of the relationship to meeting with Charles de Gaulle, President Charles de Gaulle, Marshal, who was a man I admired during military service period of my own life. And he was, Charles de Gaulle was a truly great man. He was one of the, when you look at his history, it's magnificent. And he exemplified, I just missed the opportunity to meet with him actually. I followed during the period of World War II, I followed very closely what he was doing during that period, all over the place, over Africa and other places. And I was know about something about his courageousness, also his height, which is also extremely important. But this kind of thing is the kind of thing that you're talking about now. Your relationship to me, shall we say, as expressed by the remarks you just made, and I've heard of this before concerning you and Charles de Gaulle. This is a good thing. Your relationship to this memory of Charles de Gaulle, I think, is a wonderful thing. I think it gives you strength because you know that you participated with a great leader during a great movement, and it shows that you are acutely aware at this point of what the important issues are. If your health is not in the best condition, repair, okay, so what? You're alive, you're doing what you're doing. I'm proud of you. Period. It's the best thing I can say.
Hi, my name is Patrick. I'm from the state of Connecticut, which I'm probably going to be moving out with the rest of the people because of this new $2.5 billion tax proposal from the governor. So anyway, Mr. LaRouche, thank you for the leadership and commander-in-chief of the LaRouche PAC movement. Our most important part of our jobs as organizers is to get the truth out to all the people. The idea I have about the present threat of Schellenhuber that has compromised all the churches to a genocidal end. What is your advice to me if I went to as many churches in my area and gave them the newest leaflets on Schellenhuber's agenda?
That would be useful. The question is, how do we make it most efficiently useful? I mean, you're going door to door. How do we get an organizational process going in various areas where it's become self-sustaining? You know, the problem is when people knock on doors, they may have an effect, but it's not a great effect. If you can get people to organize around an issue like the Schellenhuber in some constructive way, which actually awakens people you know, or people you run into, groups of people, if you can get them to see the issue of what the Schellenhuber thing means, then you can take it from an interaction with an individual or some individuals as such to become an organizer of people creating the sense of awareness of the danger this represents. I mean, some people will not react or they'll be afraid to react. And right now, see, the typical American is frightened. People don't like to think about that. But the typical American today is frightened out of his wits. And first of all, he became out of his, his despair over money, or income. And then he thought, well, if he talked the wrong talk and made himself unpopular with certain circles, he wasn't going to have any job at all, or get into trouble. But you get, this thing that goes on in the southern states, where you got recently records of a Confederacy system, the kind of terrorism that was run by the Confederacy system, which is applied to a lot of people who are African American sources, who are threatened. Their very existence. Today, you have people who are African Americans, so-called African Americans. I don't make like that distance. I hate to hear the words in my own mouth when I say that. But the point is, we have people who are poor people now, young people who have never had real employment in the recent time, since Cheney, Bush, and Obama. They've had no fair opportunity to grow up to adolescence, to have any possibility of career, to have access to anything they need as a human being, or just a human being. You have whole areas of gangsters who really simply are desperados in the political sense, who have almost nothing access on how are they going to survive? Are they going to steal? Are they going to do some violence? This is not them. This is the effect on them of a lack of education, of a lack of care, so forth and so on. It's an abomination against the human species when this kind of thing happens and is allowed as a negative solution. And this is what I think is the most important issue. we don't tell the truth. We don't tell the truth that has to be told. We don't say that, look, the problem is that the Obama administration has been evil, but so was the Cheney administration. Cheney and Bush, they were evil. They still are. And what do we do about it? Where do you think the problems come from? The problems will come from those who tolerated things like Bush, Bush and Cheney, or Obama. These are the kinds of forces, and they terrify people in one way or another. You want a job? You want security? You need health care? Etc., etc. And the problem is you need advocates who have some strength in making arguments and putting those arguments up in such a way that political power is forced to recognize their case. We have people who are not even educated. Today, most teaching, Manhattan is relatively a center of genius, even though it's degenerated greatly in terms of the educational standards. It's a relative genius against what's going on as education throughout most of the United States. Manhattan is one of the better areas, remarkably. No. And so therefore the deprivation of the ability of the citizen or the citizen's neighbors or family representatives, the sense of impotence which is thrust upon our citizens who are essentially largely unprotected against these abuses. And we have to create a unity of defense of the rights of those people, to encourage them to feel honor in standing up, in stating an argument on the basis of its truthfulness or its merits in other respects. And that's what's been taken away. I think that, relatively speaking, Manhattan area is a privileged area. And I returned my attention to this area recently because my concentration was that you probably get about up to 20% or more of the Manhattan population, or related population, would have some degree of ability to think through some of these problems and to become a reservoir of influence to prevent some of the stuff from happening.
Yeah, hi, Lynn. So I just wanted to say a few brief remarks to introduce the next questioner. Because we've been fighting for a long time about what you just discussed, for the dignity of humanity. And there has been a plethora of cases in the recent period of violence and killings of young people, young men in particular, throughout the entire area. The next questioner is Cecilia, and she lives about a mile from our office. Her son was tragically killed. He had no police record, nothing, through an incident which should not have occurred. And there's been a series of these things in northern Jersey where effectively young people have been shot and killed by the police. And, in some cases they've had no weapons, in some cases they've been accused of having a knife or something, but in no way was this merited. So I want you to know the background of this case. She's here joining us today, and she had a question for you.
Okay, good.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Cecilia Diaz de Hackensack, New Jersey. I'm the living mother. and I cry because that's 4 weeks. The Tripoli go to my house in front of me, and he gave a 13 shot to my son. I needed your help, and told me I can do it. Where can you help me?
I have limited things for doing certain things, but what you say, the facts that are just been presented to me by her and by you now, this is we've got a pattern of this in this area and other similar areas of police murders. And I think the minimal thing is if when someone is killed, you can't bring them back to life. But what you can do is you could give them at least the honor of justifying the person the victim who you're close to. You have to say that so-and-so would have been such and such, but I was cheated of it by this act. Isn't there justice, is your question. Isn't there justice when someone is killed publicly that way? You can't bring them back to life, but you can become an agent for justice. Now let's look at the people who died as we know on 9/11 in this region. Now look at the number of people who have organized organizations to deal with the fact that their loved ones had been murdered by this process, which is done by the British agents working as Saudis. That's what we did. The whole murders in the Manhattan region of that area is due to the Saudis, but also to the duty to the cover-up of the whole thing. Who ran the operation? It was the Saudis. Who caused that? It was the British Empire. King and Queen. They did it. So you've got to look back at the process. When you have a loved one who's been murdered by police, but whether it's police or not, it's not. Police just makes it worse. An assassination attack otherwise is less than a police attack that kills people. That's worse. It's a bigger crime. And we know the problem that exists in that area, which is adjacent to New Jersey and also so forth, Manhattan, that there is a police violence which is incited by certain police forces. And these are police forces which are not ordinary policemen. Ordinary policemen in former times in that region would never do that kind of thing. They didn't have to do it. What they've done is they've bred a kind of policeman who will do it. We had this in the Manhattan area. We had all the cases of that type. So therefore, the question is, how do we stop this atrocity? How can we help justify the life which has been taken away from their child? How do we do that? What we have to do is, like the people who fought against the crimes of the British and of Saudis in Manhattan, what did the people do? The leading people today. What they did is they're devoting their life to get justice, a security of justice for what they have been cheated of by the murders. I think this is something which is an example of what these kinds of conditions tend to produce. The other part is, where's the end of it? Where's the end of it? When can you stop it? And the fact that police officers do this is unforgivable. Unforgivable. If there is no weapon involved, if there's no threat involved, police forces can deal with the thing in very subtle ways, which can handle the problem, and they don't have to kill people. If a cop is being shot at by some wild guy, that's something which, is a legitimate event. Unless you could prevent it. And smart people, including police, could know the difference. Smart police don't go to violence. Smart police go to outwit, because they know that usually the crimes are usually committed by people who are defective in their capabilities, who become violent prone, or they're thieves, simply that much, or something like that. But when the police engage in unjustified violence, as we know in cases which are now on record in that vicinity, and which are famous now throughout Manhattan and related areas. These cases may not be the most numerous thing in the world, but they are serious examinations which are required. And so therefore I think that the point is that what we have to do is you're an individual, you're a victim. We can assist in helping you to help yourself, to find that you're able to make something with friendly help. You're able to do something useful, which will take some of the worst stain out of a cruelty which you've suffered.
Just a executive in Bergen County last year was on the issue of police militarization of the county police, and the incumbent county executive, who was a Republican, was totally opposed to it, and the Republican Party came fully behind the Democratic candidate across the party to get this guy in on the issue of militarizing the police in Bergen County. The next comment is, different mic. Oh.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay. My name is Mrs. Anton Guadagno. My husband was a very fine musician, classic musician. And I find today that we no longer have the classics. We have nothing more than noise and banging, and no arts or sciences anymore in high schools. They've been completely taken out, and forget about the lower classes. They don't exist. They don't even know who, what can I say, Schumann was. No, is that a shoe? No, Schumann was a musician. And I want to know, how does one go back to bring this into our curriculums so that we can teach young people that there is such a thing as beauty in life, not war and not killing?
The point of the matter is that we are now, the organization which I represent, we're organized in, among other things, classical musical performance. And what we're trying to do with our resources and by recruiting people in the Manhattan area and related areas, which are areas which can easily do musical work. What we're doing is we're going to the repertoire of some people who are professional classical musicians, and those who would like to be good and who have some talent for it, and to use that combination insofar as we can convey these kinds of assemblies, that it's really a choral work, choral training, choral development, classical choral development. And if you have a few people as in Manhattan area and around it, you have people who are available who want to do that kind of work. It's part of their life. It's an essential part of their life. And the thing is, we want to rebuild that thing up, but we find people who have a strong attraction to acquiring adequate skills as professional quality skills up from a more primitive, shall we say, level, and which is, of course, something I've spent a good deal of my life on, is this thing. I'm not a musician as such, but I have a lot of knowledge about music, and I've been involved in that, in organizing musical things in Italy and Europe. I was closely associated with one of the leading choral groups, or that's orchestral groups in Europe. I did a lot of that sort of thing. So the point is, how do we take a population which generally has lost the action of the capability of classical music, but they want to when approached? Well, you simply want to find out, well, maybe they can actually do it. You can test it out, see if they can learn something, and you can put them as a parallel case to some professionals, maybe a limited number of people, but they know the business, they know how to handle it, and therefore if you can get a year or two of some kind of reasonably regular development of teaching, education, practice, then you can begin to build around that first an audience, because the first thing in building music is building an audience. And the fact that you can turn a number of people into an audience, from an audience into prospective things, talents. And I think this is the fact that we lost so much of that. Because, people who are older are not replaced in these matters. This is a setback, a serious setback. And bad instruction in music is also poisonous, because people don't know how to sing. They don't know how to place the voice. They put it in the wrong place, a pocket or someplace like that, instead of putting it in the proper placement, the voice placement. We do have in ourselves, in our organization as such, we do have some professional approaches to this thing. And what we're trying to do in respect to Manhattan, we're trying to stimulate something this thing where you have real professionals who can be mixed in with people who have adapted to reasonable skills in music, and try to use this process in order to build a teamwork of groups of people who meet, not always the same group of people, but that's even better if it's the same group of people, and to develop that kind of musical program. We have to, people who don't know music in the proper term, don't know how to do it. They don't know the ABCs. They think it's something, the music is coming out of their pants or out of something else. They don't know where the place is, where the conception of composition. They think that the shouting is a thing, or something else, or some noise. They don't know how to get the placement of the voice. It's primitive. They don't know the placement. How can they succeed? We often, a lot of them, we're fascinated with Furtwängler, for example. Furtwängler's work in terms of the Ninth Symphony of Schubert, which he developed. And in that, we've often emphasized, or we do emphasize constantly, that what he did in demonstrating how the Schubert Ninth Symphony could be understood for the aid of looking at how Furtwängler did it in the post-war period. And that thing is one of the most exciting and most brilliant and also pedagogical experiences in music possible. And then you look around and other people I knew who were great musicians who at one time or other but were still alive. And they did the same thing. It was a relative handful of people. We had a whole stream of Italian, great Italian performers, and real masters. And this was pleasure, but they got killed or they died or this happened or it broke up and so forth. So the point is that we have to repair that. That's a function that society requires. Therefore, people who are devoted to that and who have some background in it, if we can bring them together to work together, just even as almost amateur things, but get them to working together on these things so they don't lose the aptitudes they once had. Because when the voice begins to change, because of the change of the aging process, people have to adapt to new conditions. So all of these things come together as a social process, not just a musical process, but a social process. It's a kind of way of living. And that's what's important, and why I think the frustration comes when you don't have that kind of way of living. When you lose contact with music and you don't know the difference between shouting and something else, and how you get the placement of the voice to produce actual music, human music, not animal music. That's the challenge.
Lynn, I just wanted also to let you know that Mrs. Guadagno's husband, Anton Guadagno, trained directly under Furtwängler as a conductor. So it's very lawful that she's here with us.
That's wonderful. Well, congratulate her. It's wonderful.
Hello, can you hear me?
I think so.
Hi, this is Howard from the Bronx, and we recently had this concert. I think one of my collaborators is going to speak in Manhattan, and I thought it was a very credible concert, and especially I'm raising a child, and us who are raising children, we need this sort of help because otherwise we have this pervasive new violence, the video games, the kids just watching violent video games for hours, day after day. And I just thought it was interesting that the performance of by Tian Zhang and Borislav Strulov of two pieces, one a Brahms cello piano piece, Sonata No. 1 in E minor, and the other one a Schumann piece, cello piano, Opus 73, Fantasy Stück. And it was interesting that before the performance, I listened on YouTube to performance of these pieces by Emanuel Ax and Yo-Yo Ma. And I thought they were fairly credible performances. And then after the performance by Tian Zhang and Strulov, I thought totally different because they were emphasizing certain things, particularly the cello and the low notes, which was much more exciting than this thing by these guys from the Juilliard school. And I just thought it was an interesting demonstration of the way that these leading Juilliard people, Ax and Yo-Yo Ma, I thought really in a way ruined the pieces, even though I didn't know.
Let me speak. If you don't mind.
No. I can ask a question. So I just wanted to know about this issue about bad music, even though under the classical brand.
Wait, hold on. Seriously, let me speak on this. Yeah. Sorry. I'm gonna take over. Sorry. Hi, Lynn. It's yes. As you know, we had the concert at Carnegie Hall. A lot of parents wrote us emails afterward. They appreciated it. Because most of them never been to Carnegie Hall, never heard this kind of music. However, I have a problem with the performance, actually, because I was listening to the Brahms today. And you could hear in the opening passage of the Brahms that it was syrupy. It was fibrous in parts. Mm-hmm. And it was not representative of what should be the classical principle in music and actually in everything. So actually my question is, how do you prevent that from happening again?
No. Where are we? At what point are we in the discussion? No, this process is extremely important, this consideration. And the question is, the idea, what many people do, even musicians that were trained, tend to be sucked into behavior which is not really meaningful. They don't get this idea of the placement of the voice. They think the voice is coming from sound, but it doesn't come from sound. It comes from the mind of the singer, the performer. And if the performer is not capable of placing their voice in that way, you get bad results. And the problem is to how to understand. Now, for example, Furtwängler actually did that perfectly. And the reason I keep talking about Furtwängler on this is the fact that his method is so clear, particularly in his version, that is his performance, the classical one, which is most famous now, that he did on the Schubert Ninth Symphony. And what he did was a perfect demonstration of the principle of placement. The placement of the voice does not lie in what people think it lies. It is not an animal thing. It's not a sound effect. It's the placement of a human voice. And it's the ability to place the human voice properly, as the classical placement of the human voice, is crucial for all important music. Otherwise, it doesn't work anymore. The placement of the voice does not lie in the instrument. It lies in the performer. And Furtwängler demonstrated that clearly. You've got this whole thing, these four movements. Is a demonstration of that. And I know major figures in music who can't do it. But Furtwängler did it perfectly. This is the standard we often use on the question of placement. Where is the voice placed? Is it placed in the sound, in the instrument, in the noise, or is it located in the way that the power of musical composition places it? And this is something that in our organization in general, what we do in this thing, this is doctrine for us, placement. And what was done by Furtwängler, the way he handled it with the Schubert Ninth Symphony, is the classic today, which is like the puzzle. People who don't recognize what that principle is, are failures in music. They don't know what the subject is. And the greatest performers were geniuses at this. Furtwängler particularly, his abilities were extraordinary. You could just get these movements, and you have this thing, boom, 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 boom. Then the next thing, boom, boom, boom. It's there. The location is not in the sound. The location is not as a sound per se. The location is in the human mind. That's where the source of the musical achievement occurs.
It's a pleasure talking to you. My name is Jose Venegas. I come from a country and a nation called Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico is going through the same crisis as Greece is. There's a $70 billion debt that Mr. Hank Paulson, who is a leading strategist in Puerto Rico, and his cohorts, Mayor Bloomberg, Giuliani, et cetera, and all the Republicans who have plundered Puerto Rico for the last, since 1898, are carrying on a policy of genocide, because gentrification is nothing more than genocide. It was practiced here with the original inhabitants by the so-called founding fathers, especially Mr. Washington, who discovered guerrilla warfare. And brilliantly, he said, well, I know this kind of warfare. I could defeat any European power with this kind of tactics. And he did. So when they met, they liberated the country from the British and decided to form a group called the Continental Congress, not the New England Congress. So they intended from the beginning to create a world empire. And here we are under a new regime, which has turned into to be actually, in fact, a global fascist regime, which even denies the contributions that the Soviet Union made to the defeat of Hitler's and his troops. Now, do you know what Mr. Hank Paulson is doing in Puerto Rico? Because I would advise you to find out what he's doing. It's a brilliant military strategy. He was called into the White House by a Mr. Ehrlichman of the plumbers fame, and he's been in there for a long time, and his specialty is economic warfare. He and his minions are ready to invade Nicaragua, and that will not be a cakewalk. Russia has forgiven Cuba a $35 billion debt and is rearming Cuba. Cuba was instrumental in the liberation of South Africa through Angola and Mozambique. All these events are related. You wrote a piece that I read many, many years ago on the energy and oil resources and how the U.S. policy was geared towards that. Now you mentioned a whole bunch of things that follow up on that. So here we are. We have militarized the police. The governor of Texas, is very preoccupied about some military exercises taken in his place, and he wants his gold out of New York City because radioactive gold is not worth anything. So I would like you to, and as a matter of fact, another piece of news, the former assemblyman from East Harlem, Mr. Nelson Dennis, just wrote a book, The War Against Old Puerto Ricans. That was a phrase that came from a carpetbagger who became the chief of police of Puerto Rico, appointed by a general who was appointed governor of Puerto Rico by the government of by the president of the United States. So Puerto Rico is a classic case of colonialism, and colonialism, there's nothing benign about it. All right, we are going through a process of gentrification where people are leaving the island of Puerto Rico. Most of us are in what we call the Puerto Rican diaspora, but we do have great musicians and a sense of music, and that has kept us together. And what you're doing with your chorus is that building esprit de corps, so I congratulate you on that. I just read The Art of War, and I realized that if you don't read that book, you don't know anything about politics. I woke up to that fact.
Okay. Now this is an old story for us, isn't it? This has been the history of. It's actually the history of society. It's not just music. It's the history of culture of society, and there are certain principles which, like, real classical musical composition strengthens the mind. You take all the Italian school, which I was quite familiar with years ago, although it still was an Italian school. We were close to that movement. And the idea of placement, the idea of location, not in the sound that you create, but in the radiation that you affect on the population, which is all classical, effective classical composition and performance is based on that. And I often use the case of Furtwängler as the model example of how that works. And I often use, because it's convenient, this one recording of his, which was done in the post-war period, on the Furtwängler, on the Schubert Ninth Symphony. And that thing contains a clarity of genius, of accomplished genius in musical achievement, which has not been surpassed. I've known some cases. I was associated closely with a quartet which was operating out of Britain, and I was very close to this team, and they had also the same kind of approach. One of the most brilliant quartets that has ever existed in modern times since Beethoven. What they did with the quartet was essentially matched closely Beethoven's design for these quartets, and he, in particular, the leader of that, was a unique individual in musical composition. And he's now dead now. He was once a good friend of mine, a very close friend of mine. His quartet is now dissolved, but there has been nothing equivalent to it reproduced yet again. This is the kind of thing that's important. There are some things in music which are so precious that if you lose them, you lose the pedagogy. You know, where some people had understood how to place the tone, how to place the voice, and that's something which is very poorly understood. So there are great musicians of all kinds of sources and so forth who just happen to fit that, as Norbert Reinin did in his case in the quartet that he produced. That's the thing. The point is, we want to achieve the pinnacle of accomplishment in the categories of things that are precious, whether it's physical science or whether it's physical classical music and so forth. You want to find out what the secret is of the art you're practicing. You want to find out what the essence of the secret of that is. And don't assume it's by expressing some popular opinion. It's by placing something which brings you into a sense of unity with your purpose in life. That's what music must do. And we must always try to find out groups of people who can work together to produce that kind of effect, because that kind of effect is precious to mankind.
Hi, Mr. LaRouche. I'm Rick Sarkeesian from Bergen County. A couple of weeks ago, there was a gentleman who came onto the Thursday night call and expressed his frustration at encountering members of the public and encountering a sense of total confusion about the nature of the British Empire. And I know I myself, I guess I've been following LPAC for about 4 years now. Previous to being acquainted with LPAC, I think that everything I knew about the British Empire was complete nonsense. Because if you try to dig into the literature, for example, all of the printed material about it, if you look at biographies of the British monarchy and so forth, it seems to be complete fluff. And you really can't get at the true nature of this group of people. However, recently I came across in the radical publication called Esquire magazine, which is a men's magazine. No, not that type of men's magazine, but a little blurb that I found refreshing called "Down with the Brits." We've made heroes of some of humanity's vilest people, the English upper class. And I won't read the whole thing, but for example, in real life, of course, nothing on this earth is more useless than a toffee-nosed Brit. It's not just that they're parasites whose principal legacy is the national borders of the Middle East. The British upper classes are anti-Semitic by instinct, racist to the core, and convinced of their own superiority despite 100 years of collapse. Well, I don't know about that, but they celebrate inequality. They nurture it. They are the living embodiment of the entitlement to wealth by accident of birth. None of this is unknown, especially to the English upper classes. I thought that was very refreshing in reading that. But my general question is, you have any comments about the role of media in this what seems to be a huge brainwashing operation of the American public? Do you have any comments on that? The role of the media in brainwashing?
I've got a monstrous collection of information on that subject. I spent most of my life on that subject because I had a somewhat fortunate upbringing in some parts, and I had access to music of strange things. I had my grandfather, my fraternal grandfather, was part of a tribe from Canada, Quebecois, and this whole family were violin makers of talent and so forth. And my grandfather came down from Quebec and settled in Lynn, Massachusetts. That became quite a character. He was string quartets performance in Paris, all kinds of things of that sort. He was a specialist in sword play, all this sort of thing, which I suppose the violin helps you to learn sword play if you know how to use it. So it's wonderful, but I think it's part of a normal life. For example, I came from a Scottish background and a bit of Irish thrown in on the side, and a lot of French as well thrown into it. So I really got a good dose of music from various sources, and I had, of course, some part of my family had some pretty good background, and at least as a child and so forth. Even though I didn't like my father because he kept beating me up, but otherwise we get along fairly well. But the music was, I was, of course, became a bass, and he was a tenor, and that didn't help anything either. Even though I'd been a stentor, he was a tenor stentor, and I was a bass stentor, and we didn't get along on the music matters either. But that's what that gives you charm in the course of experience of life. And charm is a very important thing to have. You make people happy, that's good.
Go right ahead, and I'll.
Hello, Mr. LaRouche. It's an honor to be with you.
Whoa. What happened there? I don't think it was.
Hello. It's an honor to speak with you, Mr. LaRouche. My question is that I've come upon some information that China has amassed some roughly 20,000 tons of gold. And in Greece, they're also buying gold in the street. It's no longer available. They've bought it so much. Some people I've spoken with have misconceptions that gold is going to be over the Hamiltonian system rather than part of it. Could you please explain the importance of gold and individuals' holding of it in the next coming months as it revalues?
What's happening? But now there's the Greeks and the Greeks of today have been brutally mutilated intellectually and financially in recent years. And now there is a struggle to gain freedom for the Greeks from the persecution which has been submitted by the leading super rich swindlers in France, Germany, Italy, etc., etc., etc. The fight that's going on now is a fight concerning the rights of the Greeks. This is it's the hottest issue right among all economic issues in Europe at this time. So actually, I'm on sides on that one. That I defend the Greeks. I know them. They're real. They are abused. They were raped, in a sense, financially, by the British especially. The British were the leaders in this process. But other nations, such as certain people in Germany, in France, in Italy, and so forth, have been raping the Greeks financially, and probably other ways too, who knows. So anyway, now what's happening is the point has come to a crisis. And the Greeks have had a new election recently, and they make a plea saying we were unjustly treated, in effect, and they were unjustly treated, rudely. They were stripped of all kinds of things that they really owned. And now most of the nations of Europe are on the side of supporting the people who are trying to rape the Greeks. Now, at this point, there's been a transition where Russia, for various reasons, is also defending the Greeks. And the Europeans, especially Merkel in Germany, Britain, of course, the worst of them all, always the worst. They're always at the best at being the worst. And so this is what's going on. And so this is where the danger comes from, is where the threat comes from, much of the activity, is the fact that the Greeks are now in a road where they're on the edge of getting out of Europe. That is, they're not going to go to different territory because the Greek area in that area is a Greek area. But they're going to change their denomination and they're going to go dealing with China and with Russia. Because they cannot get justice and they're getting raped financially and physically, in the sense of all wealth and everything. They're being brutalized. The threat of mass death against Greeks. And that's what the issue is right now on that issue. And that's what Europe is doing. And I'm involved in this matter of defending the Greeks. Other people are involved in it. The Greeks are justified. The British are the worst people on this thing. And the British are evil. What can I say?
What we're going to do is, since we're coming up to about 5 o'clock, we're just going to have you do now a summary. Those of us from here will take the rest of the questions. And I think I will ask you, therefore, a final question in relation to what you're seeing here. Here you have assembled people who have organized around various of your initiatives. You've heard the discussion. And of course, we have the upcoming Thursday phone call. You've made a big emphasis about this. And what I'd like you to do, since you've also talked about organizing, knowing what the potential is here in Manhattan and knowing how you have recently, shall we say, cleaned certain things out of the environment, both of our organization and otherwise. If you could say something to people about what you'd like to have them do.
Okay, I'll do it. What we need to do essentially is we need to take this area here, which is Manhattan, the general area of Manhattan as a concept, not necessarily as an exact territory, but a concept. And we know that while there are many funny things that go on in Manhattan, not all, some juicy but not good. But we know that the question of music is classical musical composition and its performance is very important in terms of its role in Manhattan. Why? Because in Manhattan you have people coming from all kinds of walks in life. They come from different parts of Europe, different parts of other parts of the world. And you have a small part of the total part of the Manhattan population, and around it, you have a number of people who really are human, intrinsically. That is, their impulses, their inclinations are human. They're artistic, they're thoughtful, they're scientific, of this sort of thing. This is what they fall into. They fall into what we call really a citizen, a citizen type. A citizen type which is characteristic of a minority, a very significant minority in Manhattan. This is a legacy of Alexander Hamilton. And you find that the Alexander Hamilton legacy is one of the most powerful influences in the United States. It had also correlatives in Europe among great artists, the greatest painters and musicians and artists in Europe. But Manhattan has that quality in it. They're not all like that, but they're people who agree with that, convergent. People come in from the United States, they find they fit into this Manhattan phenomenon. They're interested in classical music, they're interested in science, they're interested in all kinds of achievements of this type, of teaching and so forth, all these things. And they are a group which is a very important unit in the Manhattan environment. My view is that if I look at the United States as a whole, as I do, then I say, well, this area of the Manhattan area contains within it the kind of group which brought together in its proper active form, or enhanced active form, which provides a center of reference for transforming the United States itself, especially in the Manhattan region. We lost other parts of the United States. We used to be good regions because the technologies were gone. The automobile industry was taken out of existence in the United States. There were some of the skills in there which are almost lost. They're not lost. Or there's a little bit left of it here. But you look at Detroit today, Michigan and Detroit today, it's a destroyed nation, practically. You see other parts of the planet where we used to have great technology capabilities. They've been destroyed. So the question is, these circumstances, how do we save the United States from the implications of these kinds of problems? And therefore, if you wanted to do that, you would say, well, there's one place there's a good, San Francisco has some interesting things, and some other places have some interesting things in them. But the best way to do it, if you want to do it, if you want to do what I know can be done, the place to center it is Manhattan. Not to limit it to Manhattan, but to center it. You got the best chance of meeting, not screwballs, but good, solid citizens with some talents of various kinds. And that is the kind of thing around which you can regain some of the best things of what Manhattan has shown in the past time. The classical music is one of these things. Certain scientific studies which are no longer very up to date, we would say. So my view is that this organization, this area, is the natural center for assembling the people of the United States as a whole into a unified or unifying force, which is needed desperately right now for the United States and for the role we can play as the United States in solving the deadly threats which humanity faces right now. I think we can, at a relatively high rate of progress, we can bring that trend about. And if we can bring the trend about, we can get the trend to improve itself. And that's the way to get it. That's the way I would say we got to get it. That's why I came here today, this way, with this kind of message. I think we can take a core of what is the Manhattan region, identify that core, and realize that core, when assembled properly, can be a force within that region, which can then radiate a unifying effect on other parts of the United States. I think that's the best shot in the tradition of Alexander Hamilton. The best shot we can take right now. The most efficient shot we can take right now.
So I want to thank Lynn. I want to thank you for being with us today. I think you're indicating that you intend to do this again. We'll be very happy to accommodate you in that. And one way or the other, we're going to hear from you this Thursday.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. Okay, good. Yeah, well, that'll start here. Okay, so just join me again, everybody, in thanking Lynn for being with us here today.